Much has been debated about our origins. Geologists will tell you the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. A young Earth creationist will tell you it's about 6,000 years old. You might get a different answer somewhere in between that occasionally. Me? I don't know how old it is, and I'm fine with that. I guess I'd like to know how old it is without a doubt, but I don't want to be beholden to defending one age interpretation when I know that I really don't know the answer to that myself. But what I would like to talk about here is the beginning of Genesis. I've actually talked about this before in another video entitled, Was Earth Here Before Genesis Began? In that video, I mostly stuck to interpreting and speculating some using the scriptures in Genesis itself. I'll post a link to that video, but I'll briefly summarize it here. Many have long thought the beginning of Genesis is describing the creation of Earth and the universe out of nothing. On the surface, it's almost hard to argue against that, especially reading the English translations. Some people have tried to read into it what is called the gap theory, which is to say there is an unknown gap of time between verse 1 and verse 2. So God created the universe and Earth, and some time passed, and maybe other things happened, and then God formed the Earth into what it is now and put Adam on it. Now there is another view that is kind of a similar idea to that, but minus the idea that there's a gap of time between verse 1 and 2. Which would make sense because verses 1 through 3 should actually be read together as one complete thought. Remember, verse numbers weren't in the original text. They were added much later in history, long after these stories were first written down. Verse 1 could also be alternatively translated as, when God began to create the heavens and the earth was formless and void. It's a subtle difference from in the beginning, but when you read it as when God began to create, it becomes a statement that is almost suggesting the earth was already here and it was formless and void, and what God was doing was given a new form. So with that in mind, it opens up the possibility that the earth already existed before God started turning it into a livable planet. And so that's basically a summary of the textual analysis of the first few verses of Genesis. But what you might be surprised to learn is that in a non-canon source outside of the Bible, there exists the idea that there were creations prior to Adam. In Jewish legend, several worlds existed before ours, as can be read in Louis Ginzberg's The Legends of the Jews. Nor is this world inhabited by man the first of things earthly created by God. He made several worlds before ours, but he destroyed them all, because he was pleased with none until he created ours. But even this last world would have no permanence. If God had executed his original plan of ruling it according to the principle of strict justice, it was only when he saw that justice by itself would undermine the world that he associated mercy with justice and made them rule jointly. I'm not sure what text that story is originally from, as The Legends of the Jews is a compilation of Jewish legends that Ginzberg put together in what he thought would be a readable chronological order, similar to how the Bible itself is compiled. I'm also not sure if the story is part of any modern Jewish canon, or if it would just be considered a non-canon legend to modern Jews. Now, there are a lot of pagan stories that could resemble this, like the 5 ages of man in Greek mythology, and the similar myth of 4 ages in Roman mythology. Way across the world, the Aztecs had a similar myth referring to 5 ages, or 5 suns as it is also called. So the idea of ages prior to Adam isn't really all that different of an idea as to what many other cultures believed in antiquity anyway. What we might call pre-Adamites today from a Christian perspective is a concept I guess is mostly developed within the last few hundred years, though the idea of worlds before our own is ancient. In the 5th century, St. Augustine wrote about such ideas. St. Augustine himself really didn't take the literal view of the Genesis creation story, that creation had to occur over 7 literal days, though he didn't support the older pagan views about the origins of the world or multiple ages. He was writing against such things. But I mention it because even in the 5th century, people were talking about this kind of stuff. Even after all the time I've spent looking into this subject, looking into Christian and Jewish views, pagan views, and looking into textual interpretations and the general geological view we were all taught in school, I still don't really know how to answer the question of how old the Earth is, or if there was any kind of society on Earth before our own. I feel like the more I've looked into finding the answer to those questions, the more I've come to realize that it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Ancient societies had beliefs that the Earth had been here a long time, thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years. Post-Enlightenment era scientists decided the Earth had been here a long time too. They calculated it in the millions and now billions of years. Young Earth creationists think it's only 6,000 years old and claim all the geological layers the scientists are dating as millions of years are actually just layers of floodwaters receding. They are interpreting through a religious lens to come to that conclusion, but you can still look at the same text they are basing their interpretation on and come to a different conclusion if you analyze the text in a different way. So what I'm trying to say there is, they view Genesis 1 as the creation of everything from nothing, but you could also read it as God terraforming an earth that was already in existence. So how do you know which interpretation is right? Ultimately, I think the truth is the truth, even if you or I don't know for sure what the truth is. That's kind of where I'm at on this. I don't know what the truth is. I don't know how old the earth is, but I don't think it matters. I'd like to know the truth, but even from a religious perspective, I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme of things. I guess I tend to lean towards the idea that the earth was already here when God began to terraform it. And I guess it's possible something or someone had lived on it before. But I'm certainly not attached to the hip with that position. I'm really in the position of saying I just really don't know the answer to how old the earth is, and I'm fine with that. From a religious perspective, I don't think it's that important of a matter. I don't think God is going to punish anyone just because they misunderstood or didn't believe the right thing about how old the earth is. It's not that important of a matter. What difference is how old the earth is going to make on my life or yours? I'm sure there's a right answer to the question of how old the earth is, but I don't think it's important to know the answer. We live at this point in time now, and I think what's more important now is what the future holds and not how old the earth is. But what do you think? Was there any societies on earth before the creation of Adam? Or was Adam the first? Those are my thoughts on that. Thanks for listening.